Hello, I'm the Angry Spork. If you've been watching my show lately, perhaps you're wondering, Angry Spork, I'm sick of Batman feuding with bloodthirsty aliens and giant robots having trouble killing human soldiers. Can't you review a crossover involving at least one character I might never have heard of? Instead of wondering where I hid the listening device, let me fill you in on Manowar.
Created in 1992 by Jim Shooter and Bob Layton for Valiant Comics, the character was a 5th century Visigoth warrior, Auric of Dacia, abducted by aliens as part of a plan to attack Earth, at least according to the research I did. Auric frees himself and steals the Manowar armor, naturally the most powerful weapon in the aliens' arsenal, then heads back to terra firma, only to find 1600 years passed, because space travel and all that. So I guess the Tech Jacket series I reviewed in my first season has more in common with this comic than Green Lantern, as I previously snarked.
4 years after his debut, Auric had a video game that crossed him over with another hero in advanced armor, and it's the related comic we're looking at today. I'm taking issue with Manowar Iron Man in heavy metal, written by Fabian Nicieza with art by Andy Smith and Twilight Graphics. So let's see if this story makes us want to turn the page, or turn our heads.
The cover for the first half of the story is much the same as the cover of the game. The titular characters in front of a building charging forward, presumably towards the scantily clad women reflected in the glass of an unnamed building behind them. It's all 3D rendered, which, yeah, kind of shows its age. I wouldn't call it bad, mind you, it just looks polished, very well done for 1996. And I guess Tony decided to slap his corporate name on his armor.
It might seem silly, but the company logo does help differentiate him from the iron imitators in Times Square. You know, just in case the tinfoil and poorly painted cardboard armor wasn't indication enough for tourists.
We get the credits page with the two standing next to each other, arms crossed, looking as if they have some unspoken feud and both are too snooty to apologize. Since this gets sillier the more I look at it, let's begin with Chapter 1, The Reality Alchemists. Isn't the title long enough as it is? Anyway, Arnim Zola is working at a control console, narration claiming he's set his sights on a prize larger even than immortality. Augur, an antagonist from the Manowar series, asks him if they have enough fragments for the mysterious first ones to begin a multiversal merge. While they seem to have plenty of multicolored stones and containment tubes, and such a merging could be initiated, they need more fragments from each of their Earths in order to control such a process.
Then you have the paperwork, which will have to be done in triplicate for each universe you want to combine. Then you gotta check with HR, pay off the safety inspector. It's a whole thing.
On the Earth of Valiant's universe, tremors in North California are felt, though rather than the state's usual tectonic rattling, it's 3 different alien races tunneling beneath Orb Industries to raid their facility. All of them quiet as they inch ever closer to their prize. Yeah, quiet, except for the earthquakes they're causing. They soon find what they're after, another piece of the Rock of Reality, apparently the most powerful one so far. As they decide to leave before being spotted by him, their rather strangely designed ship is blasted. And I have to say, I get they're trying to convey some kind of data being narrated by a computer AI, but the grid style makes the text much more difficult to read. Sure enough, the attack came from the guy that they'd been trying to avoid, Auric, in full Manowar mode.
Are we sure Tony isn't actually crossing over with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure? Because Exo looks a lot like a stand. And in fact, this was around the time of the DC Marvel crossover, and Thor looked an awful lot like a stand user. I mean, maybe not so much with the cape, but you know what I mean.
Apparently, XO isn't terribly keen on people most of the time, much less so the aliens he just shot down, as he blames them in some way for his perpetual unhappiness. But his suit, or good skin as narration refers to it, detects something powerful enough to warrant investigation. In a literal flash, the ship is gone, leaving a small crater and a life sign emerging from the vortex, that of Iron Man, who'd really like a good explanation for what just happened.
Again, this was right around the time of the big Marvel DC dust-up, so you can't really blame them for being a little grumpy. And that also involved amalgamating universes. Seems some realities just couldn't keep to themselves in the 90s.
We flash back to the recent past, at a Stark geothermal research facility in Minnesota, and strangely, Linkara is nowhere to be found. Hostages have been taken by 2 superhuman terrorists. Maybe whoever is calling it in was too scared to add that plural S at the end there. Who they are and what they do is pretty self-explanatory. Well, the Melter maybe, but given Mr. Hyde's name, maybe he should be cowering in a closet or something. Why they do it is also as simple and pathetic as expected.
Wow. I mean, there's something to be said for something so unambitious that the narration can't muster any excitement for it, but then again, it's essentially Fabian Nicieza calling these villains pathetic for doing what he's writing them to do.
Melter says they want power, an ambiguous enough reason to hijack a scientific installation, I guess, so he forces a woman amongst the captives to open the chamber to the geothermal tapping complex. The heat that's released won't do much to the villains, just kill everyone else. But that's horrible! Duh, McFly. We're called the Masters of Evil for a reason.
Hey, you can advertise your simplistic alignment and threaten innocence all you like, but I will not stand for referencing Back to the Future in vain, mister!
So the scientist complies, but does the semantic game where she did what they asked, it's just that they didn't ask if she had the right clearance. Since she put in the wrong code, security overrides have locked the chamber shut. Before Hyde can attack, he's tossed aside by Iron Man, who kinda hangs a lampshade on the whole shoulder logo thing. There isn't much of a fight to be had, as before Shellhead can strike, Hyde and Melter teleport out. That's when he gets a call from the equipment lab, reporting the theft of a vibranium drill they were developing. While all of you were tap dancing up there, another group of Moes teleported in.
You heard the lady. Grab a spine and get cracking.
Mo is their leader.
Are you?
Wait. If Mo is their leader, then who's the leader in a group of Moes? That's a power struggle powder keg right there.
On his island of exiles, Arnim Zola detects something wrong with the Chaos Dimension.
You know, the narration made tongue-in-cheek references to the universe of valiant heroes and a world of marvels, and now we have Chaos Dimension? Should we expect Lady Death to show up? Well, that might actually fit, you know. Tony does flirt with women and death all the time, so adding her to the crossover would just be more efficient.
The energy field linking the stones between their worlds and throughout time have been disrupted. Though to read the 2 word bubbles, it sounds like Zola's saying they were disrupted by a disruption, and sensor readings suggest the cause of a failure of one of Augur's retrieval units. So the Vizier waves his staff around to place a collect call to the first one known as Crescendo, who appears as a magic hologram, I guess. Augur informs her of the hitch in their plans caused by Auric, but she kinda saw that coming, so she's not terribly concerned with a little havoc so long as their plans succeed. Baron Zemo, who I guess was just out of panel waiting to pontificate, has confidence in their plan, expositing how the first few fragments allowed them to contact Crescendo, and a few more let them transport Augur. Since the Valiant versus Rock of Reality is basically just another form of Marvel's Cosmic Cube, they'll be able to rip apart and rebuild reality as they see fit. Because their Link is out of time, or maybe she's as weirded out and confused as I am, why Zemo is posing like that, thrusting his crotch upward. Yikes. The first one ends communication, but not without the standard threat of making sure they succeed. Arnim suggests that they make it snappy, now that heroes of both worlds have discerned their intent.
Based on what? I mean, the 2 main heroes have basically just met each other, and all they know is that you've stolen some Stark tech and are after some magic rocks. Nothing about that should indicate that they figured out your very complex plan. Well, complex or complicated or confusing, one of those.
In any event, the Baron isn't too concerned, as the fragments are of a different plane and will be nigh impossible for their enemies to detect. Meanwhile, at the Contradiction, Still a flashback, but weeks after the attack on the geothermal facility, Anthony and several others are observing a holographic globe, where they've isolated dozens of energy signatures coinciding with attacks by the Masters of Evil. The largest signal is detected in Alaska, where the stolen drill would be most likely used, and where they send Iron Man. Or where I'll send me, I should have said, since Tony Stark is Iron Man.
No kidding. Well, I wasn't reading Iron Man around this time, so for all I know, his identity was so secret even he would forget and need reminders sometimes.
Lips zipped, since no one can find out there's an 18-year-old inside this tin can.
Confused? So was I. And no, we won't be seeing any of that marvelous de-aging technology from Captain America Civil War. In fact, this takes place after The Crossing, a story wherein the adult Tony Stark of the modern era turned evil, and the Avengers used some time travel to enlist the aid of his teenage self and brought him into the present to become the new Iron Man. Sometimes trying to relate to the young people makes you go to some strange places.
Zeroing in on the energy signature while camouflaged, he spots more foes drilling into an ice wall. Tanya and Absorbing Man, who are apparently married, Blackout, and a large feller named Goliath. I didn't know there was a Villainous one, but hey, wouldn't be the first time that happened in comics. Or, heck, even just Marvel. Iron Man lets them go about their business when they discover the fragment they've been after. Blackout seems rather tempted by the piece of infinity, as he calls it, but Titania reminds him that they were hired for a job. Her hubby makes a valid point. If the stone is so powerful, why give it to Zemo at all? I guess this was such an intense question, they didn't notice Armored Adventures here taking out Goliath, whom he's hanging on to with very little effort. Iron Man! I'd back off, Shellhead, if I were you. Dude, if you were me, I'd be depressed. Okay, that was a really funny line, I'll give him that. So Tony drops their supersized bruiser on them, only for a flash of green light to present us with Exo Manowar, apparently. Well, we're also looking at another pair of them, but kinda different in the other panel. Tense introductions are made as one of the Manowars introduces himself as Rand Banyan. Or XO if you're into military code names. What's by you? Iron Man. Mine's cooler.
He's going by a different name, and he's speaking in a more modern dialect rather than someone who spent the majority of their lives in a period centuries in the past? It's almost as if this could be an alternate Exo Manowar from the primary one that I mentioned earlier, and that was not initially clear to me when I first read this, and it was kind of confusing and made me feel very silly that I didn't pick up on it in the first place. I'm blaming the writer.
On another Earth with another Iron Man and, I guess, the original XO, the Good Skin analyzes the golden armor, finding it awash in the same energy as the ship he shot down. So, of course, Auric attacks. Logo-free Iron Man decides to forego the benefit of the doubt and hit him point blank with his repulsor rays. And this causes the Visigoth's armor to do its best Venom impression, as the attack disrupted the fragile link between it and the man's nervous systems. You fool!
You retaliated when I eagerly assaulted you with little to no provocation, thus revealing a vulnerability of mine that I now am explaining in unusual detail while I am at your mercy. You fool!
An apologetic Shellhead approaches, but it turns out to be a ruse, with XO fighting back. He demands to know why the Golden One is in league with the Dromac aliens as he cracks open the helmet and reveals... not Tony. That's probably Rhodey, but I don't want to assume. Anyway, he doesn't know what the stranger is talking about, explaining that he was just checking out an anomaly when he was pulled into a vortex, then begins fading away like he was never there. Auric's suit scans the residual vortex energy and finds a larger source in space, and after disrupting the EM spectrum, finds a cloaked ship. So hey, why not pop in and do some more battling? On another Earth, the real Iron Man and a false XO have made fast friends.
Yeah, again, this was kind of a big old bowl of confusing. I'm just not sure if it's clever narrative misdirection or choppy writing disguised as clever misdirection.
It seems both are aware of the reality remaking scheme at play. No idea how. and close in on Zola's island, which is insufficiently powered to hold them off. Zemo plans to use the Rock of Reality fragments, but Augur objects since its matrix has not been completed. But Arnhem's counterargument is to laser blast him in the face, so he wins the debate. The stones are released, causing a power buildup in the stronghold that hastens Iron Man's flight inside. The Baron is surging with universal power, able to see everything.
I see the foundations of the stars themselves. I see civilizations rise and crumble. I see the blob in the shower. Ew, ew, take it away, take it away.
Crescendo arrives, cursing her allies' greed, which threatens to consume both their worlds. She wants the power for herself, but is at least willing to share as she lunges at Zemo. Iron Man busts in as he is bathed in a blue light, and Auric is moving so fast towards the alien ship he's apparently left his legs behind. But he's also hit by the shockwave, a special type of shockwave that only occurs when the multiverse collapses.
This would be the halfway point, and wow, what a trip it's been so far. Not entirely bad, perhaps a little muddled.
Setting aside some of the cheesier dialogue and author narration that feels like it would have made more sense coming from a character, anyone coming into this blind might find themselves more lost than me. There's nothing to put into context who Auric is or why a character made world famous by the MCU is a teenager. The passage of time is barely explained, giving the non-linear angle to the story more of a jarring feeling. This page was the most confusing for me. 2 Iron Men, 2 Manowars, though I did notice that the X nodules are on different sides, and if you look real close you can see that Banyan is the one in the icy territory, but it's so obscured it's hard to tell. Though upon realizing the multiversal twist they were going for, narration putting real and false in quotation marks in relation to Teen Tony and Rand may be more clever a tactic than I initially thought. Though I didn't get a feeling of payoff for the confusion, but again, we're only half complete.
Will we see these alternate heroes any further? Will we get another puzzling flashback explaining how and when Tony figured out the grander designs of Zemo? Will this end up being a cautionary tale about treating the multiverse like a poorly planned game of Jenga? Tune in next time. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues.